Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm here to talk to you about what you do when you're a beginner. What does that mean? Well, oftentimes I get questions from people about how they are just starting out, being a producer, and maybe they've done it for maybe a year or less, and they want to know how they go about learning more about how to do what they want to do. They know that they want to learn about sound design and mixing and mastering and theory and songwriting and arrangement and all this good stuff, but they don't know how to go about doing that because at that very beginning stage, even just identifying all the stuff that you want to learn about is a lot. And then once you do that, that is just an awful lot of stuff, and you don't know where to begin. So this video is basically going to be my general answer to all those questions, just in my own view. So there's a couple schools of thought on the matter. There's the long-term plan, where a lot of people will suggest that you kind of throw yourself at it without any real thought and just kind of dick around on your own for a long time until you eventually figure some stuff out. That may or may not be like the super best plan, and it depends on sort of what your goals are. If your goal is to have like a very intimate understanding of the tools that you're using and develop your own personal style in a way that's very identifiably yours, that's a pretty good way to do it, because what's going to happen is that you're not going to have any idea what you're doing for a very long time, and you'll develop plans and strategies and thoughts and processes independent of everyone else and from your own self. And for the most part, like 90% of the time, it will take you an unimaginably long time. Unimaginably, a perfectly, totally imaginably long time. Like, I essentially did that, and it took me 8 years to get to the point where I could do something that I thought was valuable. In fact, the 8-year point was when I first started doing videos on YouTube, and now we're coming up on the 11-year mark. And the last couple of years have been more pointed experimentation and research and that kind of thing, but I had already built up a foundation of doing a whole bunch of crap for a very long time. And I was able to do that because for the longest time, I didn't really view producing music as being my main gig, and I just kind of like a hobby on the side. And I wasn't even trying to be famous. I wasn't trying to do anything cool with it. I was just sort of doing it. And so I accumulated years of knowledge of experience. And by the time I actually started researching about particular things, I noticed that I was just mostly putting names to stuff I already figured out. And that's more or less what happened to you. It's just that I also wasn't terribly productive for 8 years. And a lot of people don't want to spend 8 years doing nothing, because chances are, if they're looking for a more pointed approach to how to be a producer and how to learn how to be a producer, then you're thinking of having some kind of results to show for it in maybe less than 8 years. So but that is sort of one way of doing it. Not to mention the technology has improved greatly since when I first started doing it, which means that even if I were to start doing that from scratch now, it wouldn't take me that long just because of that reason alone. So then the other, so what, assuming that's not what you want to do, then what do you learn first, or where do you go from there? My suggestion is at the very beginning is not to focus too much on the engineering part. The engineering part is actually a lot easier than people think it is. Like the sound design, people tend to spend more time, getting into presets and that sort of thing, and they're sort of scared of the idea of making their own stuff from scratch, or they try and they're not really able to get decent results, and so they just don't. And they think that it's this masterful process of 10,000 hours to get to the point where you can do something that you actually want to do, and it's not really just difficult. It's just unintuitive, and what that means is that a lot of the answers, whenever just being, well, how does this sound? Like you don't really get it. You can't really see what's going on. And then when you find out how it is done, you're just like, wow, that was painfully easy. It's just that, why would you have known that? There's not really any reason why you would. And that's actually the whole reason why I have my YouTube channel the way that I have it, is because those kind of limitations are just infuriating. And so it's best to remove those. But that's also the reason why I don't really expect that people should spend that much time trying to solve that, because you will eventually do so just regardless. The thing that is the hard part is actually writing the music. Music theory itself, actually understanding theory and utilizing it, isn't that hard, just because all the rules have been fleshed out so hard, and the degree of music theory that's used to do the stuff that even I do is not that deep. And for the most part, even the most complex and ridiculous in music can be explained with music theory, but I doubt that music theory was used a lot in the actual creation of it. It's mostly just do stuff until it sounds good kind of thing. But the part that is difficult is understanding how to make the stuff that you want to make. To that end, there is a little bit of a theory thing you could do that you could learn that would help a lot in the beginning, which is to do some ear training. Ear training is where you can hear an interval between two notes and then identify what that interval is. This is useful for two things. Well, it's one thing that's kind of the same thing twice, and that is that when you hear something, you can identify what's happening. It's not perfect pitch. Perfect pitch is where you can identify what note it is from nothing. Most people need a point of reference. Find a reference. So if I play like an E, and I say this is an E, and then I play some other note, because you know that first note is E, and you understand the interval, you can tell what the next note is. That's what the interval training, the ear training, is for. And this also helps because this means that once you figure that out, and then you have an idea in your head, you hear a melody in your brain, now you can find out what that is without sort of experimenting over and over again to do it. Of course, if you do experiment over and over again, it's sort of like the music equivalent of two-finger picking on a keyboard before you learn how to type, is you do that enough, eventually you'll figure this out on your own. It'll just happen, but the ear training will make you do it faster. A wonderful ear training resource is a website called musictheory.net, and there's a little ear training link. And you go there, and it does examples, and it has you can tell what interval it is, and then they'll tell you if you're right or wrong, and you do that a bunch of times, and eventually you learn what they all are. But it's not, and even that isn't even as hard as you might think it is. So that's the music theory stuff, and then the part that's sort of not theory based. I mean, it is kind of theory based, but it's not really that you need to know theory to get it. Is understanding how songs are arranged, and it's not just about verse, chorus, pre-chorus, bridge, that kind of thing. It's about what's in them, what parts are in between them, and also sort of like how the individual instruments are layered and arranged and orchestrated and that kind of thing. Understanding that is a big point, because one of the primary problems people have when they start out making music is that they'll make something that sounds kind of cool on their own, and they'll get really into it. They'll get really into sort of what the music that they're making, and then they'll do that, and then they'll like listen to some pro level song or like just some normal song, and then they'll go back and listen to their track, and it won't even sound like music to them anymore. It won't sound. They'll just be like, it doesn't sound. It just sounds so obviously amateur, and they're not really able to identify what makes it sound amateur. And it's. I mean, there is a certain amount of engineering issues, but if you think about it, there has been music from eras and times that are made on just the worst technology with people who couldn't have possibly understood it because it was so new, and that even they stand the test of time. Not because of the engineering, but because of how they were arranged. They were arranged in a way that's musically accepted and expected. That's the part that matters. Because if you can get that down, you can get away with not doing a lot of engineering, technical, super sound design kind of stuff. If you can figure out how to actually, make the track sound like you understand music to be. And that is the key point there. It's about what you understand music to be, not necessarily what people can identify music as being, because if you honestly, whatever you want is music. So that's the end of that question. But of course, that's not the question you're asking. You're asking, why doesn't it sound as the way that I understand music to be? And this is where we start talking about references and analytical listening. This is where, because for the most part, before you started your dream of being a producer, you probably didn't pay all that much attention to the technicality of individual songs that you listened to. You were mostly just listening to it recreationally and not really focusing much on that. And then when you go and start to make music, you probably made what you understood to be music and what directions you want to go in from memory, which will have mixed, results based on who you are. But for the most part, that's not going to cut it. And it's all about specific things like, maybe like a common mistake, it's not really a mistake, but a common misconception is that people think that hi-hats are really, really loud, and that cymbals and then crashes and that kind of thing are all really loud. But if you actually pay attention to how loud they are in reference to everything else, and like on just whatever track that you like, that you listen to, you notice actually they're kind of really far down in the mix. It's just that because of the way that they're mixed, it seems like they're really present and really huge, but the levels are actually kind of far down. And then once you think about it, you go, and then you go back to your track and turn the stuff down, and it sounds a lot more reasonable to you. And it's about, like, the references are about what you listen to over the course of your life that defines what music is to you. So you gotta find your influences and your references. And if you're trying to make a specific genre, try and find people who exemplify what that genre is to you. So, if you're trying to make like 2012 style super Skrillexy dubstep, go listen to some 2012 Skrillexy dubstep and identify stuff like, at what point does he start doing certain things in the drops and the bridges? how the transitions happen, in between in between the parts, because transitions are a problem as well, and other stuff like that. And because a finished track is really just like an open book. You can identify individual instruments, and you can just be like, okay, this is what they're doing, and then just do that. And remember earlier when I said that if you're doing all this by yourself without doing what I'm describing, that you'll end up having something that's more or less your style a lot faster. This is certainly true, because a lot of the beginning, if you're trying to expedite your abilities as a producer, is going to be you copying stuff. And a lot of people kind of balk at this concept because they're thinking, oh, I want to make something that's uniquely me. I want to make something that's like that shows my style, that kind of thing. And the problem with that is that you're not good enough at this point to have a style. Like, it's very rare for new producers to really have a handle on what they can do, what they want to do, and how they can do it. So it's, because when you learn how to play piano, you don't just write your own piano music. You learn other people's things so that you can get the technique down, and then you can apply that in your own creative way. You have to get the technique down first. So then that's what the copying is for. Once you start to understand how the music that you want, that you grew up like listening to, that you are influenced by, once you understand how that music is put together, then it's not so much that you're going to then copy that music, but like I said, because this is the music that you listen to, these are the things that I define. These are the things that define what music is to you. So when you're thinking about, okay, I want to transition from this part to the next part, you're thinking, really, all you're thinking is just, I want it to be good. You want it to be good. But what good is very much a personal construct of, like I said, the music you've been listening to. So then go to that music and look at what they did. And then you'll find that what your style is, which really is always there. It's always in your concept of what you want. You just got to get it out, and you have to define it by creating these skills so that you can have it, actually be expressed through your abilities. Because at the beginning, you cannot do that unless you're talented. Like, if you have a lot of talent. Talent, of course, being a particular aptitude for doing this stuff versus work ethic, where maybe you're not talented, but if you work hard enough, you can still figure out how to do it. That's the balance of those two things are going to be different for every person. So I don't expect you to have to take 11 years to get to where I am. Just because it took me that long, based on the methods that I chose to employ to do it, does not mean that it will take you that long, for a whole host of reasons that I've already actually explained throughout this video. But once you get down that stuff, once you get down the structure of how things are put together, with the idea of like themes, a progression, melodies, transitions, arrangement of instrumentation, all that stuff, verses and choruses, totally macro track arrangement. Once you get all that down, that's when I suggest you start paying attention to stuff like mixing, mastering, sound design, that kind of thing. Certain genres, those things have different kinds of importance, but I really would not recommend that you pay too much attention to what mastering is at this point. Mixing and mastering, especially for the harder genres of EDM, are kind of a related and meshed thing. They're not really separated from each other, and it gets kind of hard to identify what parts are individually or what. And boy, you're going to find a lot of ridiculous information that may or may not apply to you, which is why I don't recommend paying attention to this stuff so hard at this particular point, because it's really trying to find help, trying to read tutorials are really going to do more harm than good at this point, because everyone likes to think they know what they're talking about, and they probably do, but for something that you probably are not wanting to do. And they like to think that what works for them in their pop rock, indie, metal recording is going to have any kind of application on what you're doing making liquid house. So you have to take it all with a gigantic grain of salt. Even the crap I say is really through the lens of my own personal experience, which may or may not reflect what your life is. That's kind of true for everything anyway, but so, try to do more stuff on what the traditional definition of mixing, which is to say that you try to make the tracks balance out without using really master compression. The actual original definition of mastering is something that has not a huge amount of importance on what modern reality is, but that's more or less what people will expect it to be at this point. Focusing more on sound design will help as well, because once you nail down getting the music to flow and having a flow, you need to have the stuff start to sound whatever it is your idea of better is, more than just passable. But you'll quickly discover, being an artist, that passable is as far as you're likely ever to get, just for your own your own satisfaction. Other people are probably going to think what you're doing is way doper than what you think it actually is, which is just the curse of being an artist. Keep that in mind. But yeah, once you're at that point, a lot of stuff should become clearer. Yeah, like what you need to figure out, how you need to figure it out, and at what point you should try doing it will be much more on point than what you were doing when you first started out. And if you're super on, like really doing it like hours and hours a day every day, you could probably get to that point in less than 6 months, not without much issue, from square zero. So it's not easy, but it's a lot easier than people think it is. And good luck, I guess. I hope that made sense. I hope that helped. That's more or less the advice I give people when they ask me, like, I'm a beginner, I do these things, what do I do? How do I get better? And that's what I tell them. So if you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all this good stuff. And as usual, have a good day.